A minute because
Want me to stop the recording?
no, that's fine. I just I'm not on my work computer. They're working on it, so I'm on my personal computer, so I have to log into absolutely everything because it's not automatic here. And okay, let us call to order the June 20th, 2023 meeting of the Long Range Planning Committee. Can I get a roll call, please?
I'm just stating the start time is 11:02
Thank you.
and roll. Bertucci,
Present.
Dilger,
Here,
Feelick,
we can't hear you.
McNulty.
I don't know.
There we
The
go.
microphone.
Here.
There it is.
Sorry, thank you. I have Becky, I have Diane. Rademacher
Here.
and Smith.
Here.
For CCS, we have Rebecca Malinowski and Beth Stonefritter.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any additions to the agenda? Hearing none, do we have any public comment? Also none. Okay, so could I get a motion to approve the minutes of the April 27th, 2022 meeting?
I move to approve the minutes of the April 27th, 2022 meeting.
Second.
Thank you, Diane, Joanna and Diane. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
We actually need to do roll calls since this
Oh, we
is-
do. Sorry.
Oh,
Sorry,
Okay, roll call, please.
you get to hear me again. Bertucci,
Yes.
Dilger,
Abstain, I wasn't there.
Feelick,
I also was not there.
McNulty,
Yes. Aye.
Rademacher,
Yes.
and Smith.
Absolutely. Okay, the minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is update on existing goals. I know that Rebecca sent out that document. Rebecca, do you want to hit any highlights for us?
Did I share? Sure. I think that it's been a very productive year. I certainly think that, like usual, we underestimated the amount of time some projects would take, notably the move, which seems like Beth did an awesome job. It was just, oh boy, kind of all consuming for longer than I thought it would be. There are some goals that have not been completed, specifically my goals of monitoring interest in CCS and then addressing the barriers associated with that. So in part, this is because we had some really strong interest in CCS from different standalone libraries, and just dealing with those queries was kind of enough. My long-term goal is to have, whenever someone emails me, and even if it's like a library that is like, oh, like that's a special library that has 400 items in their collection, like they're not really going to join. I always ask, like, what are your current costs? If like, again, no, if they're like, oh, we can't afford CCS, it's too much. Like, okay, like what are your costs? Let's just like have it on record, at least so we can talk about it with budget and finance or talk about it with long range planning. And mostly those emails don't get replied to. So this is something that's still on my radar, but I'm not proposing this year as like its own project. I think it makes sense more on a library to library basis to look into it. For example, we had a query from Cook Memorial. And so I was able to provide them with, a very general estimate without them going through the whole application process. But then I also spent, an hour going through their board packets, looking for what they're paying, innovative, and what they're paying OCLC. So I think that's going to be a better use of my time than like creating a survey and trying to get library directors who potentially have no interest in CCS to answer it, to get a better understanding of costs. And then the other one that I'll comment on is the data use and data literacy evaluation. So this is something we talked a lot about in like this sort of pre-planning phase and then never moved passed in part because we redirected our energies into the DEI audit dashboard, and also because it became really unwieldy and it wasn't clear if we were creating a problem or solving a problem. So we're going to continue to monitor this and focus on developing good documentation for our reports. And then one of our proposals for next year addresses this a little bit as well. But again, the office move, I think, was a big success, and we'll see some savings overall for members. And I'm happy to take questions on any other projects here or comments.
I will just echo that as I read through it, I was like, wow, did do a lot. I forgot about these things, and all these things were happening during the office move and all of that. Anybody else? Questions, comments? Okay. Well, then.
I would just say, that your entire process is very impressive. It's very organized, very documented, very, very impressive.
Yeah, I like the
love it.
steps there in green. It's really clear. Yeah. Okay. So the next thing on the agenda, and Rebecca and I didn't have a chance to talk about this agenda beforehand. So the next thing says capacity exercise.
And this is also just an update. If you're interested, I can talk about it further, but as part of our proposals for next year, CCS went through this rather lengthy ideation process to really engage staff in a way that we haven't previously. And it all culminated in our all staff day at our shiny new office last week on Thursday. And we did an exercise together on capacity planning for each individual, and then looking at that as a whole for the team. Because, we're a service organization, and I think like libraries, the impulse is to just say yes, 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 yes to all the things. So I wanted to go through with staff and say but do you have time to do all these things? And so, the results were overall not surprising. We're pretty busy. Some staff, depending on their role, have more project work than others. I included it just for your reference, but I don't need anything from the committee unless, again, you have any questions or concerns. It was just here's part of our process, and it was a thing that we did, which again informed the proposals for next year.
It was interesting to see. I appreciated that you included it. I had a question about how you guys came up with your time. How much did you do some time tracking for a couple of weeks, or how did you do that?
We didn't. So I love our CCS team so much. They're so detail oriented. I'm like, it was supposed to be like a 10-minute exercise as like a staff meeting component. But what about this? And what about this? And should I look at like the last 3 weeks or the last month? And so these really are very rough estimates. We talked about what kind of activities would go into each bucket. And I was like, just think about the last month or two, day to day, week to week, how much time you spend on these activities. And as a result, my team, who are just amazing, are like, I think I'm going to do some time tracking personally now, just to see how close I was on my estimates. So this is something that we're going to redo maybe every 6 months to just so staff, again, keep that in their mind. And then for some of our team members, they really do go pretty in depth on every question they get. And we're trying to do some training on yes, we want to do a reference interview. We want to make sure we're getting into any deeper issues, but also some questions are just yes or no questions. So trying to find that balance. It's oh, you did spend a lot of time on tickets, over the past 6 months. Were there some that maybe didn't need a 6-page write up with them. And again, that's different for everybody. You know, folks who provide more information and some folks who don't provide enough. So we're going to keep an eye on this sort of thing, but they are 100% like back of the napkin estimates
Okay. Okay,
at
interesting.
this time.
Other questions?
Would you do it again? Well, you are going to do it again, so I guess.
Yeah, we are going to do it again. And then I think I'll give folks a little bit more notice so they can think about it. What I didn't want was for them to spend like 3 hours on their time estimates, which is what I would have kind of expect from them, or from half of them at least. So I think as we do it more often, they'll kind of ease into like, yeah, I did spend this much time or that much time. But yes, we will do it again.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Other questions, maybe not about the capacity planning, but the ideation or any of that staff process? Sounds fun.
It was. Last year we just had them submit like, you know, a really basic write-up. And this year we wanted to explore a little bit more like, why do we like after this meeting, you know, not all of the ideas are on my proposal list. So they'll get some feedback on like, yeah, that is a great idea, but like we don't have the time, as you saw in the capacity project, or like this is a better idea for a couple of years from now. Or so they'll all get some feedback on that so we can kind of keep engaged and working in this collaborative way, hopefully.
Okay. Great. So I guess that leads then to the proposals for next year.
Yes. So the proposals for next year, you have the Word document that just kind of outlines them. And then the Excel document, as I noted in your email, does include some things that aren't on the proposal list, like reviewing the strategic plan, which is set to expire in 2024. When we wrote it to be like kind of broad and flexible. That the overwhelming feedback was like, keep doing ILS stuff, don't do a bunch of other stuff. So I don't know that we need to do like a multi-month strategic planning process if that's still the general feeling from the board. Like hardware replacement, we have a few big things due to be replaced that are already in the budget. So it's not in our strategic plan because it's operational, but I wanted to note it as, you know, a thing that's going to take IT time. So this is the general timeline. I do want to hear your feedback on the ideas as a whole. And as we get there, one thing I want to call out is you'll see this kind of gap from Find More Illinois. And so this Find More Part 1, as I'm calling it, is really CCS writing up and working with Rails to develop a robust proposal of what that would look like for all CCS libraries to join and presenting it at governing board in November. So there'd be an intro in August and then a vote in November. And if governing board says, no, we're not doing Find More Illinois, which is maybe what the result would be, maybe not, I don't know. Then we would move this BT CAT trial up to this fiscal year, as opposed to waiting until next fiscal. But as we learned in our capacity planning, we don't really have the bandwidth to do both of those at the same time. So that is Find More is one of the things I really wanted to talk to the group about. If there's absolutely no appetite for it, it's even the kind of research is a big project, and we can take it out and replace it with something else.
If you wanted to talk about that first, I mean, I can say that we have started looking into it here, so I would be curious. I don't know about other libraries. What about the rest of you? Any interest in Find More?
Yes, I remember reading it, but maybe you could just recap it real quick.
Sure. So Find More Illinois is the Rails overlay that connects independent ILS systems to facilitate resource sharing. So
Oh.
this would be a way for non-CCS libraries to place holds and access our material. And vice versa, that you could do a Find More hold before you go and look for an OCLC hold. So a couple of notes. Highland Park, Northbrook, and Indian Trails have all at various times expressed interest in Find More Illinois. But as far as I know, none of them have proceeded with a contract, and I don't know if it's just a timing issue or just they're not interested. A couple of reasons this has come up is one is we're looking for options to not pay OCLC $400,000 a year. What options do we have? So I will be very direct. At this time, Find More Illinois is not a replacement for interlibrary loan with OCLC. Mieko and Rachel got some sample lists from a few of our libraries of titles that they had received from OCLC. And the number of those items that were in Find More was not impressive, let's say. However, we do know the issue with Find More is like nobody wants to join until everybody's joined. So most of the members right now are smaller members. And that if I do think that, the CCS libraries have a really impressive collection and that it could really entice other members. Naperville has flat out said, if CCS joined, we would join. So the concern, of course, is what does that look like for CCS in terms of being like a lender? Is it overwhelming? What would it look like? So we don't know. And that's what we'd want to dig into a little bit further during this part 1 and present that to the board. So the other component is we know that there are libraries in our service area that are just not going to be able to join CCS with our current membership fee structure. So, CCS could say, that's fine. We're happy with our membership. We're doing our resource sharing, and those other libraries aren't getting that sort of direct access to our material, and that's fine. CCS could say, let's change our membership fee structure to really subsidize smaller, less funded libraries, which I think would raise a lot of questions and concerns. CCS could also say, let's join Find More Illinois, where we'll get some benefit. And we know that then, if a library can't join CCS, we can still say, yeah, here's how easy it is to get our stuff from Find More Illinois, which is a much more affordable product for them. So it might be a nice middle ground in terms of like doing nothing and, essentially paying for their CCS membership. So I think there's a lot of questions to consider there.
Is Gail Borden a member?
I'd have to double check. I don't know the
Yeah.
membership
For
list.
some reason, I thought they were, but I don't know if Becky remembers this, but a couple of the meetings that we've had recently with the McHenry County Directors Group, people have been talking about it because they are smaller libraries, and I think Fox River Grove may be one.
Mm-hmm.
And I know at one point they did look at CCS many years ago and found it to be way too expensive for them. So, yes, that is a way for us to share with our close neighbors.
Yeah, North Chicago Library is like very firmly, is it North Chicago? Yeah, in our service area, and they just joined Prairie Cat last year because they can't afford CCS. And they had inquired, and I was like, here's, what it costs. And
Right. And a couple of the McHenry libraries are in Prairie Cat.
Yeah, Palatine looked at Find More recently because we were starting to get a really hard push from Rails, reaching out to me, reaching out to staff. And I would echo what Rebecca said. It right now, we were interested because we thought, well, maybe it could replace OCLC interlibrary loan. And right now it can't. And it's because there's not enough libraries on board. And so we compounded that problem by saying, well, we're not going to join because there's not enough libraries on board. So there is a little bit, the resource sharing part of me is like, yeah, I would like for us to do this because it's good for the whole library community, even if it's maybe not good for me at Palatine. The fees were a little high for what benefit we thought we were going to get, the annual fees. And I don't know if there would be an opportunity for CCS to negotiate with Rails on that.
Yeah, there is I believe a 30% discount if all consortium members join. Like if we did a full consortium membership, it would be kind of like the tiers for each library and then minus 30%. That is on our list of questions though, is like, again, if we're going to be a massive net lender, could we negotiate some sort of like credit after X amount of lends or you know, some sort of, I don't know. I think Rails might be resistant to doing that just from like an accounting point of view, but it is something that's on our list for that kind of first part of the project if we were to pursue it.
Mhm. So if the collection for Find More Illinois was larger, would it eventually be a viable replacement for OCLC?
It could be. It's hard, again, it's hard to say. I don't think it will ever fully meet all of our ILL needs, especially if we look at non-returnables like journal articles and things like that. So, you know, libraries would need to be comfortable doing like direct, let's say in the future, we only had Find More Illinois. Libraries would need to be comfortable doing direct requests to like Carly libraries or other academic institutions to get some of those journal articles. And it's hard to say, like, again, what the growth of Find More would look like.
So the cost is mostly for the transportation of it all to reimburse the actual physical movement of the material, or what is the cost to Rails about?
The cost to Rails is software costs. So they're paying an outside vendor, Autographics. It's like we could get, like, it's like the Lincoln libraries that use InReach to get like Arlington Heights and Skokie, whatever, you know, they pay for that InReach software. The Autographics software is very similar to that InReach software, and they pay the Autographics vendor for the software and the licenses to use it.
What about that group of libraries? Are they being courted to join
Yeah.
Find More as well?
Yes, they are being courted to join Find More. I don't know how successful they have been. I mean, they haven't been successful yet. I will say that Waukegan is an InReach library, and they are at this time planning to leave InReach to come to CCS. And then Cook Memorial has also reached out, and they are a Lincoln InReach library as well. The vibe that I'm getting from them is a little bit different. It's like our board wants to know why we're not in CCS. How much does it cost? As opposed to very interested in joining.
They were in CCS
Yes,
from the
yes,
very
they were.
beginning. So
Yeah.
that was their
So-
choice.
Yeah, so I don't know. Again, I'm not like out to pick off Lincoln libraries, but I don't know how it will affect them, you know, when two libraries leave, if two libraries leave.
And Naperville is a Lincoln library, right? So they kind of said they would Find More if CCS joined.
Yeah, and that wasn't, I mean, like a binding thing, obviously, but
Yeah. But they're
before
clearly thinking about it.
yeah, before we moved to Polaris and kind of changed the way we do institutional ILL, they were one of our heaviest borrowers. They would log into Enterprise and place holds and get a lot of material from us. And we stopped doing that because they're not in a consortium. We don't have an agreement with them, et cetera, et cetera. So I know that they value the collections that we offer. You offer.
So we'll be paying OCLC and Rails for a while then. We'd be adding the cost of this.
Yes, it would be an additional cost. At this time, it would not replace anything.
Oh, goodness sakes.
I think what I'm hearing is that there's maybe enough interest among us to at least do that first phase that you were talking about, pulling the whole governing board and looking further into costs and what it would entail, and then making I'm definitely not hearing a no, Rebecca, you don't waste your time here, right?
As an
what I'm
individual library, we would not be interested, but as a part of the consortium, if we all went, I wouldn't have a problem with it at that point. It's just, we've seen it as all of our little neighbors would be probably borrowing more from us than they are now.
Mhm.
And we're not big, so.
Yeah, one of my like primary research goals is to get some more data on, again, what the volume even looks like. And we do have some, if you go through those linked documents, Deborah did get some data from Pinnacle Libraries on what they're lending out. And it's not a ton per month. So I don't know. Well, there is, again, I agree. I'm hearing that like there's definitely interest in learning more, and including like how requests are routed. Like they couldn't just say, Diane, give us all your stuff.
Mhm.
Like we want to look into all of that.
Okay. So what else did you want to ask us about on this 23, 24 strategic direction goals? And then I'm going to ask if anybody on the call had questions for Rebecca, but first we'll go back to Rebecca. Are there things you specifically wanted to discuss?
That was really the big piece, which is like we can either do the Find More Illinois or do the BT CAT trial. So just to give you some context on the BT CAT trial. So BT CAT is a product from Baker and Taylor that is a source of records and a cataloging utility. So, could potentially replace the cataloging component of OCLC. Because if we did want to drop OCLC, we need interlibrary loan and we need cataloging. We need these two separate things. So there's BT CAT and there's Sky River in addition to OCLC. And Rachel's recommendation after some analysis this year is that BT CAT is a better option, and that she'd be interested in running a trial. The cost for BT CAT is like $25,000 a year for all CCS libraries, compared to the cataloging component of our OCLC bill, which is like over $300,000 a year. So the cost savings is huge. However, it's not a direct one-to-one replacement and would require some pretty significant workflow changes for tech services staff. So that is why doing, I think, an extended trial would be really important. Baker and Taylor offers like a free 4-week or 6-week trial, but we definitely want to extend that to make sure that, the library gets a chance to like adjust to the workflow and then actually work in it, instead of the trial being the whole, this is horrible and new phase of the trial. So OCLC is, unsurprisingly, not super interested in negotiating with us on pricing. So if we were to say, we're all going to use BT CAT instead of OCLC Connection, and we don't have a replacement for interlibrary loan and want to keep using OCLC for interlibrary loan, they're saying it would be like $50,000 a year for interlibrary loan. However, that $50,000 a year does not include the ability to update our holdings in OCLC. So if we wanted to, it's sort of backwards. They're like, well, if you want to update your holdings, you have to pay for the full cataloging subscription. But if you don't want to update your holdings, then you just pay for interlibrary loan. Then like we wouldn't be lending out on OCLC, or at least not in the same level. You'd just be getting stuff in.
Which is
So, like,
fine for us, but
Right. It just doesn't make sense. I'm like, why won't you just let us update our holdings? It's an automated process. Like, how does it hurt you for us to do this and like continue to participate in resource sharing? They're like, no, it'll be $300,000 to use this API. I'm like, okay. So neither Find More Illinois nor BT Cat or an alternative on their own are a replacement for OCLC. It's really a both and. So either way, there'd be like this double paying situation, as Cindy pointed out earlier, until we could really get to a point of like pulling the plug on OCLC. Deborah and Rachel and I have met with OCLC reps several times to try to like talk through this in a logical, reasonable way. And they're just like, no, you can't. There's no way to do it. You have to have the full subscription. I'm like, but you're in charge of what the options are. Just change them. So,
Is there any way that Rails could get involved? Because OCLC, a lot of the history with OCLC came from the state library. And the state library is the one that should be renegotiating because they locked us all in years ago.
Yes, Rails has been very involved. I've been on 2 separate committees with Rails looking at OCLC, and the results are, essentially the same, that the state library is not willing to renegotiate the OCLC contract because there will be winners and losers, and they politically don't want to be in a situation where there are winners and losers, right? Because just CCS redistributes those costs. So Jeannie Dilger is a great example of who would be a loser in this situation, and that her OCLC costs really went up when she joined CCS because in lieu of renegotiating, we're redistributing.
Mm-hmm.
So the state library is not willing to do that. And Rails is funded by the state library or by the state, and not willing to say we're going to do our own contract and pull people out of the state group services contract. And honestly, OCLC won't give us any better pricing. So we requested pricing, like, okay, what if we left the group services contract? Diane, they gave us the same pricing.
Mm-hmm.
They just gave us the same price. And I was like, why would Highland Park need to pay $30,000 a year? And like, I think in that case, Palatine was up to a whopping $500 a year. And I was like, how does this make any sense? Like, look at their stats and provide the pricing. I'm like, well, if we look at their stats, you're not going to like the pricing. And they just like won't do it.
Well, and I know, I mean, mine are, so we joined CCS in 94, 95. It was before we moved. So yeah, probably about 95, because that's when we switched over from NILS to NSLS in 94. And we had a year to get off of NILS's ILS. So it was priced, we're still paying about the same, like $5,500, but it was based on a collection that was tiny. And so, yeah, ours would go up big time, but I don't know. I just think that not necessarily to make us all go up, but they should be lowering the costs with the threat of us leaving and losing all of that money.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask. With all these libraries across the country, looking at Sky River and BT Cat and all this stuff, you're clearly not seeing OCLC like seeing the writing on the wall and being more willing to negotiate, huh?
They're not. The whole state of Florida left. The whole state of Florida left OCLC, and they were like, oh, well, OCLC did nothing to keep them.
Well, they're picking up foreign entities, so maybe it doesn't matter. I don't know.
Yeah, the only group that may have gotten any traction with negotiating is it's a Boston College Consortium. And I did reach out to their director and I haven't heard back, but essentially I'll send out the docs or the link in the email. They posted an open letter on their website that was like, OCLC, why won't you negotiate with us in good faith? And you know, they said that they want all the negotiations to be public so their members and the public can understand it. But now they won't answer emails because all the negotiations are confidential. But there are at least negotiations. So I'm kind of waiting to hear. Folks at Rails are better connected with them than I am. So I'm trying to get an update on that. But yeah, I know Swan looked at leaving the group services contract and did not. And so Swan's pivot was to get the most value out of your OCLC contract. So like we have to pay these OCLC costs. So like let's make sure we're really using up every last like ounce of OCLC value. So yeah, it's kind of a mess. And so there's various options we can look at, but all of them will require, unless we want to like lose functionality for some time, double paying someone somewhere for some period. It's wild. It really is just like totally fascinating, but also very confusing and frustrating.
So wasn't there, not too terribly long ago, they were coming around selling their own ILS version? Did that go away, or do they still offer some sort of an ILS from OCLC or WorldCat or something?
OCLC does. My understanding is that it's largely used by academic libraries. I don't know of any publics that are using it. That doesn't mean that they're not. But yes, OCLC does have an ILS product.
Do you think that's part of the holdout? They'd rather have us looking at their ILS than negotiating on the price of what we are using?
I think they just think that they don't have to negotiate because there's no viable alternative. And you know, to some extent that's true. So again, like I think if we moved to Find More Illinois and BT Cat, we'd probably save like $200,000 a year. But what would that cost in staff time to like change workflows and you know, like do additional workflows that maybe OCLC did more seamlessly? And so OCLC is banking on libraries not being willing to do that, which, you know, has been working for them for a million years. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, on that exciting note.
So those are the things I wanted to bring up. So I'm happy to turn it back over to the group and to Jeannie for questions and comments. And
yeah, I mean, I do think it seems like there's enough interest to have this conversation at the bigger governing board level, at least. So, because we all like to bitch about OCLC. So, I do have a question about at least one of the others, which is the succession planning for CCS staff. I just hope you could talk to us a little bit more about what you have in mind for that.
yeah, so we have in the past, of course, tasked staff with writing documentation for their positions. Like what do they do all the time? But it doesn't have a central home. And we haven't, like we've just said, go do this and haven't really put checks in place to make sure that it's been done. So this is to create some structure around that. So the thinking at this time is that I would meet with each staff member and like write out, here are the things that we need to make sure we have documentation on for your position. And then, you know, they'd work on it independently as part of the regular work for 6 to 8 months. And then we'd have another check to say, okay, all of your documentation is here. It's all in this central place. We have what we need. And then we just review it annually as part of the annual evaluation process to make sure the documentation's up to date. This was an idea from Virginia, who I was delighted came up with a documentation idea. So I was on family leave. Kathleen was on family leave. We had a staff member, you know, a few years ago who was on medical leave for an extended period. You know, and so before Kathleen and I left, we were both like furiously writing up our documentation on what to do. So, you know, we all have the tools scattered around and we just need to bring them together. this is one of the smaller projects on our list.
Well, and I was gonna ask who's meeting with you regularly to make sure that you're documenting and updating your tasks.
I would say Beth. Beth is Beth is in charge of making sure I don't ruin everything. So yes, yeah, I will also again, mine is up to date as of 2 years ago, but could definitely use a review.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions about any of these?
So the ones that are listed here are the ones you're wanting to pick from, or you're wanting to sort of do all of these?
These would be our goals to complete all of
Oh,
these.
all
that
of
are
them.
listed on
Okay.
this. Yeah, and then the ones that are, there's some that are linked in this additional details folder. Here, so like Project Solar, onboarding analysis, e-resource price index. I mean, those are ones that we have not selected or that I'm not recommending for this year. So if there's any there that you're like, oh man, why not?
Oh. Well, I was sort of looking at the e-resource price index, not so much about the pricing, but that anything we can do to make e-resources, you know, a little bit easier and more streamlined.
Yeah, so this proposal was more about like databases than like OC or than like Overdrive type
Oh, okay.
resources. And so it is still kind of like in our hopper. If this is something that Rails offers their deals and discounts program. And as part of that on their website, they kind of list out who they have pricing for and like get in touch with Layla if you want the pricing. So the CCS staff idea that was from Kathleen was, you know, like, why don't, like, these should all be publicly available numbers. You should be able to FOIA any contract from any library. Like, why can't we make the pricing visible? So I do not disagree with that. And I recommended that she get in touch with Layla over at Rails because, you know, this is such a focus of her position and she works very closely with a lot of these vendors. I feel like there's probably a savvy political reason that Rails has not pursued this. And so where we left it with Kathleen at this time is that if Rails, like Kathleen kind of discussed this idea with Rails, and there's some interest in making things more visible, and that if Rails wants to move forward with that we would support it and work with Rails on that. So it would be a more Rails-wide resource instead of a CCS resource.
Okay. Great.
Good question, Cindy. Anybody else? So at this point, you are asking for us to recommend this to governing board, or what is the next step here?
Yes, to recommend these to governing board or recommend these potential goals to governing board. Yeah.
So do we as a committee have to vote on that? Or is it just a sense of
Yeah,
the,
yes, if we could, that would make governing board more efficient.
okay, I will entertain a motion to recommend the fiscal year 2023-24 strategic directions and goals to the full governing board.
I will second.
Okay, I think you can put me down as the motioner then.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I can move if you prefer.
Okay, Diane moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Becky. Okay, all those in favor say, oh no, wait, we have to do a roll call. Sorry, let me silence my phone here. Roll
That's
call.
okay. Yes, I was to make sure I was unmuted. Bertucci,
Yes.
Dilger,
Yes.
Fiolic,
Yes.
McNulty,
Yes.
Rademacher,
Yes.
and Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, motion passes.
Can I ask a question sort of after the fact?
Sure.
So you were I believe you commented that these goals would then sort of roll out to the technical groups for them to set their goals. Was that the understanding that somehow you would get participation in these or?
So CCS staff will set their performance goals for the year based on our strategic goals. Some of these will have CCS member library staff participation, but most of these are pretty focused internally, like virtualizing our own server.
Yes, I must have misread it then. So you're talking about internal staff setting their goals, not
Mhm.
going out to the technical groups. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions for Rebecca before we adjourn? When will our next committee meeting need to be?
Ideally, we would have a meeting mid-year to look at process or progress. We did not do that last year. Oh, actually, that's not true. We're gonna meet like September, October to discuss the existing strategic plan and see if we recommend re-planning or extending or tweaking. So we'll look at our options in the fall.
Okay, so something for the committee to be thinking about then.
Yeah, and we'll probably shoot for September just to stay further away from ILA, since I cannot avoid a conflict. No matter how hard I try, I'm like, oh no, it should be the week of ILA. That's when we should do it.
Diane, will you still be here?
I'll be here till, I think my last day is October 6th. We have a
Okay,
staff
we'll
meeting
plan it
that
before
day.
October 6th, Rebecca.
All right, noted, before October 6th.
We can't let Diane get away without one more meeting.
Yeah, one more.
All right, that sounds good.
Okay, with that, then I will call the meeting adjourned at 11:48 a.m. Thank you all for your time this morning.